on to chapter 3, drawers, chests, and wardrobes. Let's see how far we can get. I always feel a slight shock, a certain mild philological pain, whenever a great writer uses a word in a derogatory sense. To begin with, all words do an honest job in our everyday language, and not even the most ordinary among them, those that are attached to the most commonplace realities, lose their poetic possibilities as a result of this fact. But somehow, when Bergson uses the word drawer, he does it disdainfully. Indeed, the word always appears in the role of a controversial metaphor, giving orders and passing judgment, always in the same way. Our philosopher dislikes compartmented arguments. This seems to me to be a good example for demonstrating the radical difference between image and metaphor. I shall therefore insist upon this difference before returning to my examination of the images of intimacy that are in harmony with drawers and chests, as also with all the other hiding places in which human beings, great dreamers of locks, keep or hide their secrets. Although there is a superabundance of metaphor in Bergson's writings, in the last analysis his images are rare. It is as though for him imagination were entirely metaphorical. Now a metaphor gives concrete substance to an impression that is difficult to express. Let me... One moment, please. Let's revisit that sentence again. Metaphor gives concrete substance to an impression that is difficult to express. Yes. Metaphor is related to a psychic being from which it differs. An image, on the contrary, product of absolute imagination, owes its entire being to the imagination. So we have metaphor, we have image. Metaphor being, I can't express. It's like cotton candy ice cream, but it feels like something else. Image being totally imagination. I don't know if I agree with that. If image is imagination or experience as well. Anyway, later when I plan to go more deeply into the comparison between metaphor and image, we shall see that metaphor could not be studied phenomenologically, and that in fact it is not worth the trouble, since it has no phenomenological value. Metaphor has no phenomenological value. I don't know. At the most, it is a fabricated image, without deep, true, genuine roots. It is an ephemeral expression. It is, or should be, one that is used only once, in passing. We must be careful, therefore, not to give it too much thought, nor should the reader think too much about it. I don't like Bachelard's tone of voice here. I don't think you can separate a fabricated image from an image, at least these days. I don't know, these days being the last so many hundreds of years. Gets into the reproduction of the image, gets into Benjamin type things. I don't know. I don't know if I'm with him on this. But let's go further. And yet, what a success the drawer metaphor has had with Bergson's followers. Contrary to metaphor, we can devote our reading being to an image, since it confers being upon us. I'm going to say it again. Contrary to metaphor, we can devote our reading, being, to an image, since it confers being upon us. In fact, the image, which is the pure product of absolute imagination, is a phenomenon of being. It is also one of the specific phenomena of the speaking creature. 2. As is well known, the drawer metaphor, in addition to certain others, such as ready-made garments, is used by Bergson to convey the inadequacy of a philosophy of concept. Concepts are drawers in which knowledge may be classified. They are also ready-made garments which do away with the individuality of knowledge that has been experienced. I'm talking about the reproducible object, yes. The concept soon becomes lifeless thinking, since, by definition, it is classified thinking. I'm interrupting a lot, forgive me, but with compartmentalized thinking, even the way, higher education is done, where it's very compartmentalized, even in public school, lower down you have science class, you have history class. There's a lot of overlap. Anyway, going back to what he said, the concept soon becomes lifeless thinking, since by definition it is classified thinking. I think yes, in a lot of ways. I should like to point out a few passages which show the polemical nature of the drawer metaphor in Bergsonian philosophy. In L'Evolution Gratis, we read, "Memory, as I have tried to prove, is not the faculty for classifying recollections in a drawer, or writing them down in a register. Neither register nor drawer exists. Faced with any new object, reason asks, L'Evolution Gratis, in which of its earlier categories the new object belongs? In which ready-to-open drawer shall we put it? With which ready-made garments shall we invest it? Because, of course, a ready-made garment suffices to clothe a poor rationalist." In the Second Oxford Conference of May 27, 1911, later included in La Pensée et la Mouvement, page 172, Bergson shows the indigence of the image according to which there exist, here and there, in the brain, keepsake boxes that preserve fragments of the past. In the Introduction to Metaphysics, La Pensée et le Mouvement, page 222, Bergson states that all Kant's science was frames within frames. He was still haunted by this metaphor when he wrote his essay entitled La Pensée et le Mouvement, 1922, which in many respects summarizes his philosophy. On page 80 of the 26th edition, he says again that in memory, words are not deposited in a cerebral or any other kind of drawer. If this were the occasion to do so, it could be demonstrated that in contemporary science, the active invention of concepts, necessitated by the evolution of scientific thinking, is greater than those determined by simple classifications that fit into one another, as Bergson expresses it. In opposition to a philosophy that seeks to discover the conceptualistic features in contemporary science, the drawer metaphor remains a crude instrument for polemical discussion. But for our present problem, which is that of distinguishing between metaphor and image, this is an example of a metaphor that hardens and loosens even the spontaneousness of the image. This is particularly noticeable in the simplified Bergsonism taught in the classrooms, where the polemical metaphor of the drawer in the filing cabinet comes back time and again in elementary analyses that set out to attack stereotyped ideas. It is even possible, when listening to certain lectures, to foresee that the drawer metaphor is about to appear. And when we sense a metaphor in advance, there can be no question of imagination. This metaphor, which I repeat is a crude polemical instrument, together with a few others that hardly vary at all, has mechanized the debates that Bergsonians carry on with the philosophies of knowledge, particularly with what Bergson himself, using an epithet that passed quick judgment, called dry rationalism. Three. These rapid remarks are intended to show that a metaphor should be no more than an accident of expression, and that it is dangerous to make a thought of it. Aha, okay. I see what Bergson's saying, and I like it. I go back on my initial comments. I understand what he's saying, the difference between a spontaneous imagination and expression versus thinking it out, making a thought of it. So I'm going to start this section again. These rapid remarks are intended to show that a metaphor should be no more than an accident of expression, and that it is dangerous to make a thought of it. A metaphor is a false image, since it does not possess the direct virtue of an image formed in spoken reverie. In spoken reverie. How beautiful. A great novelist has used this Bergsonian metaphor, but it was for the purpose of characterizing the psychology of an errant fool, rather than that of a Kantian rationalist. I referred to Henri Basco's Monsieur Quéribonneau à la campagne, in which the drawer metaphor is presented in reverse. It is not the intelligence that is a filing cabinet. The filing cabinet is an intelligence. Maybe I should read this. I like that. It's a tool. The only piece of furniture, among all that he possessed, for which Quéribonneau felt real affection, was his solid oak filing cabinet, which he contemplated with satisfaction whenever he passed in front of it. Here, at least, was something that was reliable, that could be counted on. You saw what you were looking at, and you touched what you were touching. Its proportions were what they should be. Everything about it had been designed and calculated by a meticulous mind for purposes of utility. And what a marvelous tool! It replaced everything, memory as well as intelligence. In this well-fitted cube there was not an iota of haziness or shiftiness. Once you had put something in it, even if you put it 100 or 10,000 times more, you could find it again in the twinkling of an eye, as it were. 48 drawers, enough to hold an entire classified world of positive knowledge. M. Quéribonneau attributed a sort of magic power to these drawers, concerning which he said that they were the foundations of the human mind. I like that. I have my desk over there. That is the desk. Anyway, it should not be forgotten that in the novel, this is said by a very commonplace man. But the novelist who makes him say it is an unusually gifted one. For with this filing cabinet he has succeeded in embodying the dull administrative spirit, and since stupidity must be turned to ridicule, Henri Bosco's hero has hardly spoken when, as he opens the drawers of the august cabinet, he finds that the maid has used it as a place to put mustard, salt, rice, coffee, peas, and lentils. His reasoning cabinet had become a larder. Perhaps, after all, this image could be used to illustrate a philosophy of having. Okay, since it may be taken both literally and figuratively. There are many erudite minds that lay in provisions. We shall see them later. We shall see later, they say to themselves, whether or not we'll use them.